Dr. Katie Morrison wiped the sweat from her forehead as she bent over another wounded patient. The alien creature in front of her had blue skin and forearms, but the pain in its eyes looked just like any human she had ever treated. She carefully cleaned the plasma burn on its shoulder and applied the healing gel that would help it recover faster. The medical tent around her was busy with activity. Other human doctors and nurses moved between the beds, treating anyone who needed help. It did not matter if they were human, alien, or even former enemies. The Red Cross symbol on their uniforms meant they would help anyone who was hurt. Dr. Ryan Collins looked up from his patient and smiled at Katie. He had been working for 16 hours straight, but he never complained. That was just who he was. Next to him, Nurse Amy Patterson was helping a young alien child drink some water. The child's parents had been killed in the fighting, but Amy treated him like he was her own son. The planet Kepler 442b had become a refugee camp almost overnight. When the Zelani people had to flee their home world, they had nowhere else to go. The Galactic Council had asked for volunteers to help, and humans had been the first to answer. They brought medical supplies, food, and shelter for anyone who needed it. Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of his ship, looking down at the planet below. He could see the medical camps spread across the surface like white dots. Each one had a large red cross painted on top, so everyone would know it was a place of healing, not fighting. The Red Cross was sacred to humans, and most alien species had learned to respect it too. Jake had been in many battles during his 20-year career, but he was proud that his people always followed the rules of war. They protected civilians, they treated prisoners well, and they never attacked medical facilities. It was what made humans different from many other species in the galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Adams walked up to Jake with a worried look on her face. She was holding a datapad with the latest intelligence reports. The news was not good. Captain, we are getting reports that hegemony forces are moving closer to this system, she said quietly. They have been pushing into neutral space for weeks now. Jake nodded. He had been expecting this. The hegemony was a group of militant aliens from the Krex Empire who believed that showing mercy was weakness. They did not follow the same rules of war that most civilized species agreed to follow. To them, everything was fair game in battle. How close are they? Jake asked. Close enough to be here in a few hours if they want to, Lisa replied. But surely they would not attack a medical facility. Even they must have some limits. Jake was not so sure. He had fought against hegemony forces before, and they seemed to enjoy causing pain and fear. But attacking a medical camp would be crossing a line that no one in the galaxy had crossed for over 200 years. Down on the planet, Dr. Morrison continued her work. She did not know about the approaching danger. All she cared about was helping the steady stream of patients that kept coming to her tent. Many were Zelani refugees who had been injured during their escape, but some were also human soldiers who had been hurt in small skirmishes with hegemony scouts. War Prime Zefek stood on the command deck of his flagship and looked at the images of the planet below. His large reptilian frame cast a shadow across the floor as he studied the human medical camps. To him, they looked like perfect targets. War Prime, one of his officers said carefully, those are medical facilities. They are protected under galactic law. Zefik turned his cold yellow eyes toward the officer. His voice was like grinding stone when he spoke. Galactic law is for the weak. These humans think their mercy makes them strong, but it only makes them easy to defeat. We will show them what real strength looks like. The officer wanted to argue, but he knew better. Zefik had killed subordinates for less than questioning his orders. Still, attacking medical camps seemed wrong, even to a hegemony warrior. But War Prime, if we attack their healers, the humans might respond differently than they have before. the officer said. Sethek laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. How differently can they respond? They follow too many rules to be truly dangerous. They worry about prisoners and civilians and medical neutrality. We follow no such rules. That is why we will win. Back on the planet, the medical teams continued their work as the sun began to set. Dr. Collins had finally taken a short break to eat something. He sat outside the main medical tent and looked up at the stars that were starting to appear in the darkening sky. Amy Patterson joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Ryan and sat down beside him on a supply crate. They had been working together for 3 years now, and they had become close friends. Do you ever wonder why we do this? Amy asked, taking a sip of her coffee. Ryan looked at her with surprise. What do you mean? I mean, we could be safe back on Earth, working in normal hospitals, treating only humans. Instead, we are out here in dangerous space, helping aliens we barely understand, following rules that our enemies do not even care about. Ryan was quiet for a moment before he answered. I think we do it because it is who we are. Humans have always believed that some things are more important than winning or being safe. Helping people who are hurt is one of those things. Amy nodded. She knew he was right, but sometimes she wondered if their enemies saw their compassion as weakness. High above them, hegemony ships moved into attack position. War Prime Zefik had made his decision. He would teach these humans that mercy was a luxury. They could not afford. The red cross symbols on the medical tents glowed softly in the darkness, marking them clearly as places of healing. For over 2 centuries, those symbols had been respected by every civilized species in the galaxy. But respect was something the hegemony had never learned. As the first hegemony ship powered up its weapons, Dr. Morrison was helping deliver a baby. The Zelani mother was exhausted and scared, but Katie held her hand and spoke softly to comfort her. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and crying, Katie smiled. This was why she did what she did. She had no idea that in a few minutes, everything would change. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone attacked the people humans sent to heal instead of harm. The first plasma blast hit the main medical tent at exactly 0347 hours. Dr. Katie Morrison was checking on a patient when the explosion threw her across the room. The smell of burning plastic and worse things filled the air as emergency lights began flashing red. Amy Patterson was helping an elderly Zelani woman when the ceiling above them collapsed. She threw herself over the patient to protect her, but the falling debris crushed her left leg. Amy bit back a scream and kept working, using her medical training to stay calm, even as her own blood soaked into the ground. Dr. Ryan Collins ran toward the main tent when he heard the explosions. He could see hegemony ships in the sky above, their weapons glowing as they fired again and again at the clearly marked medical facilities. The Red Cross symbols that should have protected them were being used as targets. This cannot be happening, he said to himself as he pulled survivors from the wreckage. No one attacks medical camps, no one, but it was happening. War Prime Zethik had given the order, and his ships were following it. They fired at every tent, every medical vehicle, every person wearing a red cross. To them, it was just another military target. Captain Jake Sullivan watched in horror from his ship in orbit. His communications officer was trying to contact the medical teams, but most of the signals were dead. The few messages that got through were desperate calls for help. Captain, we have to do something, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Adams said. Her voice was shaking with anger. They are killing our medics. Jake wanted to fire back immediately, but he knew that would only make things worse for the people on the ground. Instead, he ordered his ship to move closer and began launching rescue shuttles. Every second counted now. The attack lasted only 20 minutes, but it felt like hours to the people on the ground. When the hegemony ships finally stopped firing and moved away, the medical camps were destroyed. Smoke rose from the ruins of what had been places of healing. Dr. Morrison tried to stand up, but her ribs were broken and her left arm was bent at a strange angle. She could hear people crying and calling for help, but she could barely move. Around her, the tent that had saved so many lives was now a tomb. Amy Patterson was still alive, but she could not feel her legs anymore. She used her arms to drag herself toward the sound of a crying child. Even hurt and dying, she wanted to help. Dr. Collins found her there an hour later when the rescue teams arrived. She was holding the hand of a young Zelani boy, singing a lullaby in a voice that was getting weaker and weaker. The boy was not hurt, but Amy was bleeding inside where no one could see. "Ryan," she whispered when she saw him, "the boy is okay. Make sure someone takes care of him." Those were the last words she ever spoke. The rescue shuttles from Jake's ship worked through the night, pulling survivors from the wreckage. But for every person they saved, they found 3 more who had not been so lucky. The medics who had come to help others were now the ones who needed help. When the sun rose the next morning, the final count was terrible. 13 human medical personnel were dead, including Dr. Morrison and Amy Patterson. Dr. Collins had survived, but he was badly hurt and might never walk again. Dozens of alien patients and refugees had also died in the attack. The news reached Earth within hours. Admiral Patricia Woods was in a meeting when her aide brought her the report. She read it twice, then put it down and stared at the wall for a long time. "Madam Admiral," her aide said quietly, "the President wants to see you immediately." Patricia nodded and stood up. She had been in the military for 30 years, but she had never seen anything like this. Attacking medical personnel was not just a war crime. It was something that civilized people simply did not do. The meeting in the White House was short and intense. President Johnson listened to the report without speaking, his face getting harder with each detail. When Admiral Woods finished, the room was silent for a long moment. "They knew exactly what they were attacking," Commander Nick Turner said. He was the head of military intelligence, and his job was to understand enemy thinking. "Our intercepted communications show that War Prime Zethek specifically ordered his ships to target what he called human weakness centers. He meant the medical facilities," the President said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. He believes that our willingness to help others, even our enemies, is a weakness that can be exploited." The President looked around the room at his advisors. These were people who had spent their careers trying to find peaceful solutions to problems. But sometimes peace was not possible. "What does the Galactic Council say?" he asked. "They express deep concern and call for measured responses," Admiral Woods replied. "Ambassador Velkorth wants us to work through diplomatic channels." The President almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Diplomatic channels. They murdered our doctors and nurses, and the Council wants us to file a complaint." "Sir, the other species are sympathetic, but they are also afraid," Commander Turner said. "They know that if they take strong action against the hegemony, they might be next. So they want us to be the ones who get hurt, as long as they stay." "Safe," the President said. "It appears that way, sir." The President stood up and walked to the window. He could see the city below, full of people who were going about their normal lives. They did not know that everything had just changed. "Admiral Woods," he said without turning around, "I want you to prepare a response that sends a very clear message. These people think our compassion is weakness. They think our rules make us easy targets. I want them to learn how wrong they are." "Sir, what kind of response are you authorizing?" The President turned around, and everyone in the room could see that something fundamental had changed in his expression. "I am authorizing the use of Article 7 of the Human Military Code." "Admiral." Woods felt her blood turn cold. Article 7 had been written after humanity's first interstellar war, but it had never been used. It was the legal framework for actions that went beyond normal military operations. Sir, are you sure? Article 7 is ... I know what Article 7 is, Admiral, and I know what it means. But they crossed a line that should never be crossed. They killed our healers. They targeted the people we sent to help, not to fight. The meeting ended with orders that would change everything. Within hours, messages were being sent to military bases across human space. The orders were classified at the highest level, but the meaning was clear. The hegemony had thought they were fighting against weak humans who cared too much about rules. They were about to discover that those rules were not chains that held humanity back. They were the leash that kept humanity's true nature under control, and now that leash had been cut. Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood in front of a room that officially did not exist. The building had no name on the outside, and no government records showed that it had ever been built. Inside, 24 of the most dangerous humans in the galaxy sat quietly and waited for her to speak. These were the executioners. They were not regular soldiers. They were not Marines or pilots or engineers. They were something else entirely, something that humanity had hoped they would never need to use. 3 days ago, War Prime Zethek ordered his forces to attack our medical facilities on Kepler 442b, Colonel Mitchell said. Her voice was calm, but everyone in the room could hear the controlled anger underneath. 13 of our people died. They died because they chose to heal instead of harm. Sergeant Alex Rodriguez sat in the front row. He was a quiet man with scars on his hands from years of training. He had been an executioner for 8 years, but he had never been activated for a real mission. None of them had. The Galactic Council wants us to file complaints and work through diplomatic channels, Colonel Mitchell continued. They want us to be patient and understanding. They want us to turn the other cheek. Lieutenant Emma Foster looked around the room at her fellow executioners. She could see the same cold anger in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. They had all sworn an oath when they joined this unit, an oath that most people would never understand. For 200 years, we have followed the rules of war, Colonel Mitchell said. We have shown mercy to enemies. We have protected civilians. We have treated prisoners with respect. The galaxy thinks this makes us weak. She pressed a button on her remote, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed pictures of the destroyed medical camps, the bodies of the dead medics, and the face of War Prime Zethek. Today, the galaxy learns the truth. Our mercy is not weakness. Our rules are not chains that hold us back. They are the leash that keeps our true nature under control. And that leash has just been cut. The room was silent. Every person there understood what she was saying. For most of human history, their species had been hunters and warriors. They had fought against predators, against nature, and against each other. The rules of civilized warfare were not natural to them. They were learned behaviors, carefully taught and constantly reinforced. But underneath those learned behaviors, the old instincts still lived. The executioners were trained to use those instincts in a controlled way. They were the dark reflection of humanity's medical corps. While doctors saved lives without asking questions, executioners ended them with surgical precision. Your mission is simple, Colonel Mitchell said. War Prime Zethek and his commanders have violated the most sacred laws of war. They have killed healers. They have targeted medical facilities. They have shown that they do not understand the difference between civilization and barbarism. Master Chief Tony Washington raised his hand. He was the oldest person in the room, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. What are our rules of engagement, Colonel? You will operate under the Justice Protocol, she replied. Anyone who directly participated in the attack on our medical facilities is a legitimate target. Anyone who gave orders for the attack is a legitimate target. Anyone who could have stopped the attack, but chose not to, is a legitimate target. The Justice Protocol was something that other species did not understand. It was not about revenge or anger. It was about balance. When someone broke the fundamental rules that kept civilization working, they had to face the consequences. What? About collateral damage? Asked Lieutenant Foster. Minimize it, but do not let it stop you from completing your mission, Colonel Mitchell replied. The hegemony chose to target non-combatants. They chose to ignore the rules. They will learn that actions have consequences. The briefing continued for 2 more hours. Each executioner received a specific assignment. Some would go after hegemony, commanders. Others would rescue captured human personnel. Still others would send messages that the galaxy would never forget. Sergeant Rodriguez was assigned to Team Alpha, led by Master Chief Washington. Their target was War Prime Zethek himself. It would not be an easy mission, but it was the most important one. Captain Jake Sullivan did not know about the executioners, but he could feel that something had changed. New orders had come from Earth, orders that gave him more freedom to act than he had ever had before. He was told to provide support for special operations that he was not allowed to know about. The first sign that something was different came when his ship received a request for transportation. A group of passengers wanted to be taken to a specific location near Hegemony Space. They looked like normal civilians, but something about them made Jake nervous. The leader of the group was a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Linda Hayes. She said she was a researcher studying alien cultures. She was polite and friendly, but Jake noticed that she never smiled with her eyes. What Jake did not know was that Dr. Hayes was actually Master Chief Washington's second-in-command. The other researchers were all executioners, carrying equipment that looked like scientific instruments, but was actually some of the most advanced military technology humanity had ever developed. On the planet below, the few survivors of the medical camp attack were still recovering. Dr. Collins was in a hospital bed, his legs wrapped in devices that were slowly rebuilding his shattered bones. He kept asking the nurses about his colleagues, but they would not tell him how many had died. Dr. Rachel Hayes, the real doctor, was in the bed next to him. She had been unconscious for 2 days after the attack, but she was finally starting to wake up. She was the only witness who had seen the attack from beginning to end. When the intelligence officers came to interview her, she told them everything she could remember. She described how the hegemony ships had deliberately targeted the Red Cross symbols. She explained how War Prime Zethek's voice had come over their communication system, telling them that mercy was weakness. They wanted us to know why they were killing us, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They wanted us to understand that they saw our compassion as something to be destroyed. The intelligence officers recorded every word. Her testimony would be used later when the galaxy demanded to know why humanity had acted as it did. But that was still to come. For now, the executioners were moving into position. They traveled on civilian ships, carrying false identities and equipment that looked harmless. They spoke to each other in code, using words that seemed innocent but carried deadly meaning. The hegemony had no idea what was coming. Their intelligence services were focused on military threats, not on doctors and researchers and business travelers. They did not understand that humanity's most dangerous weapons were not ships or bombs or plasma cannons. They were people who looked normal but carried justice in their hearts and death in their hands. War Prime Zethek sat in his command center, pleased with his victory. He had shown the galaxy that human mercy could be turned against them. He had proven that following rules was a weakness that could be exploited. He had no way of knowing that his actions had awakened something that humanity had kept sleeping for 2 centuries. The executioners were coming, and they would teach him, and his followers a lesson that the galaxy would never forget. The age of human restraint was over. The age of human justice was about to begin. The first sign that something was wrong came at Hegemony Command Post 7 on the moon of Zarian Prime. The night shift commander tried to contact the day shift at 0600 hours, but no one answered. The communication system was working perfectly. The base had power. All the equipment showed normal readings, but no one was responding. When the relief force arrived 3 hours later, they found something that would haunt hegemony forces for years to come. The entire command staff was dead, but they had not died in battle. Each body showed precise wounds that had been delivered by someone who knew exactly where to strike. It was surgical, clinical, and absolutely terrifying. But what scared the hegemony soldiers most was not the bodies. It was the message painted on the main command center wall. Someone had used Krek's blood to paint a perfect red cross symbol, the same symbol that marked human medical facilities. Below it, written in perfect hegemony script, were the words, "Justice has come." War Prime Zethek received the report while he was eating his morning meal. He read it twice, then threw his datapad across the room. His personal guard, 12 of the finest Krex warriors in the hegemony, looked at him with concern. "How did humans get past our defenses?" he roared. "Command. Post 7 had sensors, patrols, and automated weapons. No one could have gotten close without being detected. But someone had, and they had left no evidence of how they had done it. The security recordings showed nothing unusual. The sensors had detected no intruders. One moment the command staff was alive and working, and the next moment they were dead. Captain Jake Sullivan was coordinating search and rescue operations when his communication officer handed him an encrypted message. It was short and simple. Package delivered to customer. Moving to next delivery location. Jake did not know what it meant, but he had been told to expect such messages. He acknowledged receipt and went back to his work, not knowing that he had just confirmed the first successful executioner mission. Master Chief Tony Washington and his team were already moving toward their next target. They had spent 2 weeks studying the layout of Command Post 7, learning the routines of the guards, and finding the weak points in the defenses. When they struck, it had been swift and silent, but this was just the beginning. Washington had a list of 17 hegemony officers who had been directly involved in planning or carrying out the attack on the medical facilities. Each one would be visited by the executioners. Each one would face justice for their crimes. The second target was Colonel Vextar, the hegemony officer who had transmitted the attack orders to the ships that bombed the medical camps. He was hiding in a heavily fortified bunker on the planet. Keth 7, surrounded by his most loyal troops. Sergeant Alex Rodriguez led the team assigned to eliminate Vextar. They approached the bunker disguised as traders selling medical supplies. The irony was not lost on any of them. "We have healing equipment for your wounded soldiers," Rodriguez told the guards at the front gate. "Our prices are very reasonable." The guards let them in because hegemony forces had been taking heavy casualties in recent battles. They needed medical supplies, and these traders looked harmless enough. What the guards did not know was that the boxes labeled medical equipment contained some of the most advanced weapons humanity had ever developed. Colonel Vextar was in his office when the executioners found him. He looked up from his desk as Rodriguez entered the room, expecting to see a nervous trader trying to make a sale. Instead, he saw death walking toward him in human form. "You gave the order to attack our medical facilities," Rodriguez said quietly. 13 healers died because of your decision." Vextar reached for his weapon, but he was too slow. Rodriguez moved with the precise efficiency of someone who had trained for this moment his entire adult life. The hegemony officer was dead before he could draw his gun. The other guards in the bunker suffered the same fate. They had chosen to serve someone who attacked healers, and now they faced the consequences of that choice. When the executioners left the bunker, they painted another Red Cross symbol on the wall, along with the names of the 13 medical personnel who had died. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Adams was now Captain Adams, having been promoted after the medical facility attack. She was coordinating naval operations when reports started coming in about hegemony bases going silent across 3 star systems. "It is not random," she told her intelligence officer. "Someone is targeting specific people, specific locations. This is not terrorism or sabotage. This is something else." What she did not realize was that she was witnessing the Justice Protocol in action. The executioners were not attacking randomly. They were working through a carefully prepared list of war criminals, eliminating each one with surgical precision. Lieutenant Emma Foster had been assigned to rescue operations. Human medical personnel had been captured during the attack, and intelligence suggested they were being held in hegemony prison camps. Foster's job was to get them out and eliminate anyone who had harmed them. The first prison camp was on an asteroid. In the Vex system, Foster and her team approached it in a ship that looked like a cargo hauler, but was actually packed with military equipment. They landed at the camp's supply depot and began unloading boxes. "Inspection time," Foster announced to the camp guards. "We need to check the quality of the medical care you are providing to prisoners." The guards were confused, but did not want to refuse. Proper treatment of prisoners was supposed to be important even to the hegemony. They led Foster and her team into the camp, not knowing they were walking into their own execution. Foster found the captured human medics in a section of the camp that was meant for the worst criminals. They had been beaten, starved, and tortured for information about human military capabilities. Some were barely alive. Dr. Stephen Carter, one of the captured medics, looked up at Foster with eyes that barely focused. "Are you real?" he whispered. "I am real, and I am here to take you home," Foster replied. Then she turned to the camp guards who had been watching. "You have harmed healers. You have tortured people whose only crime was trying to help others. That cannot be forgiven." What happened next was swift and final. The guards who had participated in the torture died quickly. Those who had simply followed orders were allowed to live, but they were given a message to deliver to their superiors. "Tell them that humanity remembers," Foster said to the surviving guards. "Tell them that when you attack our healers, you face the consequences. Tell them that justice has come for all of them." War Prime Zephic was beginning to understand that something unprecedented was happening. His forces were being systematically destroyed, but not in normal battle. Specific people were being targeted and eliminated with precision that seemed impossible. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his intelligence chief. "How are humans getting past our best defenses and killing our best officers?" The intelligence chief had no good answer. "War Prime, it appears that humans have capabilities we did not know about. They are not using conventional military tactics. This is something else entirely." "Something else?" Zephic's voice was dangerous. "What do you mean, something else?" "Sir, I believe the humans have activated some kind of special forces unit that we have never encountered before. They are not fighting like normal soldiers. They are hunting us like we are prey." For the first time since the attack on the medical facilities, War Prime Zephic felt something he had not experienced in many years: fear. He was beginning to realize that attacking human healers had not been a show of strength. It had been the worst mistake of his life. He had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping, something that his people were not prepared to face, but it was too late to take back what he had done. The executioners were coming for him, and there was nowhere in the galaxy he could hide from human justice. The galaxy was about to learn that mercy was not weakness. It was the choice of the strong. And when that mercy was rejected, when healers were murdered and rules were broken, humanity had other options. Options that War Prime Zephic was about to experience firsthand. War Prime Zephyk was found 3 days later in his most secure bunker, deep beneath the surface of his home world. He was not killed immediately like the others. Instead, he was taken alive by Master Chief Tony Washington and his team, who had spent weeks planning the perfect capture. When Zephyk woke up, he was in a small room with white walls and bright lights. Across from him sat a human woman in a military uniform. Her name tag read Judge Advocate General Linda Baker. Behind her stood several other humans, all watching him with cold, professional eyes. War Prime Zephyk, Judge Baker said in a calm voice, you are charged with war crimes, crimes against sentient beings, and violations of galactic law. Specifically, you ordered the deliberate attack on clearly marked medical facilities, resulting in the deaths of 13 medical personnel and 47 civilian patients. Zephyk tried to speak, but his throat was dry. When he finally found his voice, it came out as a harsh whisper. You have no authority over me. I am a warrior of the hegemony. I follow no law but the law of strength. Judge Baker nodded as if she had expected this answer. That is your right, War Prime. But you attacked our people while they were providing medical aid under the protection of galactic law. That law exists for a reason. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy on every communication channel. For the first time, alien species got to see how humans handled justice. It was not like their own systems, which focused on punishment or deterrence. Human justice was about something deeper. Dr. Rachel Hayes testified from her hospital bed, her voice weak but clear. She described the attack in detail, explaining how the hegemony ships had deliberately targeted the Red Cross symbols. She told the court how her colleagues had died while trying to protect their patients. Dr. Morrison was helping deliver a baby when the first blast hit, she said. Amy Patterson threw herself over an elderly patient to protect her from falling debris. Dr. Collins was trying to evacuate the children's ward. They died because they chose to help instead of harm. Zephyk listened to her testimony with growing anger. They were weak, he interrupted. They should have been fighting, not wasting time on useless mercy. Judge Baker looked at him with an expression that made several alien observers step back. Mercy is not weakness, War Prime. Mercy is the choice of the strong. You have chosen to forfeit that mercy. The trial lasted for 3 days. Evidence was presented, witnesses testified, and legal arguments were made. The galaxy watched as humans demonstrated their concept of justice. It was methodical, fair, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Captain Jake Sullivan was called to testify about the rescue operations after the attack. He described finding the destroyed medical camps and the bodies of people who had come to help, not to fight. The Red Cross is sacred to us, he told the court. It means that whoever wears it will help anyone who needs healing, regardless of who they are or what side they fight for. When someone attacks that symbol, they attack everything we believe in. The Galactic Council sent representatives to observe the trial. Ambassador Velkorth of the Altarian Federation watched with growing unease as he realized what he was seeing. This was not just a trial for one war criminal. This was humanity showing the galaxy what happened when their most basic principles were violated. On the 3rd day, the verdict was announced. The panel of judges found War Prime Zephyk guilty on all charges. The evidence was overwhelming, and he had not even tried to deny what he had done. War Prime Zephyk, Judge Baker said as she stood to deliver the sentence, you have been found guilty of the deliberate murder of medical personnel, the targeting of civilian medical facilities, and the violation of the most fundamental laws of civilized warfare. The sentence is death, to be carried out by the executioners, according to human tradition. Zephyk finally understood what was happening to him. You cannot do this. I am a prisoner of war. I have rights under galactic law. Judge Baker's expression did not change. You gave up those rights when you decided that our healers were legitimate targets. Justice is not revenge, War Prime. It is the consequence of choice. You chose to break the rules that keep civilization working. Now you face the result of that choice. The execution was carried out the next morning. It was quick and clean, performed by Master Chief Washington himself. Zethek's last words were a curse against human weakness, but no one was listening anymore. The real message came in what happened next. Captain Jake Sullivan addressed the reformed Galactic Council with words that would change interstellar relations forever. For 2 centuries, humanity has honored the rules of civilized warfare. He said to the assembled alien representatives, "We have shown mercy because we choose to, not because we must. We protect medical personnel, civilian populations, and prisoners of war because these protections are what separate civilization from barbarism." He paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with each representative. Let today serve as a reminder. Our medics, our healers, our symbols of mercy are not targets. They are warnings. They represent our choice to be civilized. When someone attacks them, they force us to make a different choice. The executioners did not disappear after the operation ended. They became a permanent part of human military structure, a reminder that humanity's adherence to the laws of war was a choice, not a limitation. Colonel Sarah Mitchell established new training programs, not just for humans, but for allied species who wanted to learn. The programs taught that true strength lay in protecting the defenseless, not in attacking them. The Red Cross is more than just a symbol, she told her first class of alien students. It represents the choice between civilization and barbarism. Every species must make that choice for themselves. The galaxy learned to see human medical symbols differently. The Red Cross was no longer just a mark of medical neutrality. It was a promise of protection, backed by the most precise and implacable force in known space. Human justice. Years passed, and the Kepler 442b incident became a case study in military academies across the galaxy. Young officers learned about the importance of protecting medical personnel, not just because it was law, but because violating that law had consequences. Sometimes, in the deepest parts of space where hegemony remnants still operated, soldiers would find Red Cross symbols painted on their bases overnight. They served as reminders that somewhere in the darkness, the executioners were watching and waiting. Dr. Morrison, Amy Patterson, Dr. Collins, and the other victims of the medical facility attack had their names inscribed on a memorial wall at the Geneva Medical Center on Earth. Below their names was a simple inscription: "They healed the galaxy. We kept it safe." The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about humanity. They were capable of infinite compassion and terrible justice, often at the same time. Which face of humanity you encountered depended entirely on how you treated those who chose to heal rather than harm. The executioners made sure that lesson was never forgotten. They were humanity's promise to the healers of the galaxy. You will be protected, and those who harm you will face justice, no matter how long it takes or how far they run. The Red Cross endured, stronger than ever, backed not just by law, but by the absolute certainty that humanity would never again allow its healers to be murdered without consequence.